All right, thank you. Appreciate Ian, a great talk, and everyone who has worked so hard to make this event come to life. I know there was a lot of work behind the scenes and even more work right near the end to get us here as opposed to other places. But thank you, Alder, Faraz, Eric, and Andrew so much for giving us the time and space to do this. Now, I'm supposed to talk about Earth observation and something about kind of the state of the industry and what's going on commercially and what's going on in the defense world. But before I do that, I want to take us back a few weeks in time. I was in Palo Alto at our office, which we have there, and it's a nice building, kind of brightly lit, and I'm sitting at my desk with my computer and my inbox is open, and it smells like coffee. It smells like hot coffee. Hot coffee that I'm trying not to choke on at the moment, and the problem is the email that has just come across my screen. It's from Eric Bruckner, and it says, Andrew, thank you so much for volunteering to be at the San Francisco Deep Tech Week and for agreeing to talk in front of all of these people. Now, it's probably helpful to note that, like most engineers, I hate public speaking, right? I really don't like getting up in front of a crowd and talking to lots of people. And beyond this, I've not heard of this event that I have, volunteered for. And so I'm having a little bit of trouble with this. And I close my inbox, and I pick up the phone, and I call my co-founder, and I say, my co-founder Isaac, I say, Isaac, do you know anything about this event that I am apparently been volunteered for? And he says, well, Eric and Faraz are having this event, and there's going to be a lot of people there, and I told them that you'd love nothing more than to speak to all of the people that they have gathered. And I said, oh, really? Now we sort of switch to the tone of voice that is like exclusively reserved for either co-founders or people who've been married for like 50 years. I'm not going to go, yes, we need to go. What's going on? And I said, Andrew, we have our first product that is being launched. We have our second major government contract, and we have satellites that are going to the launch pad, and we've been so quiet. You need to tell people about what's going on at Array. And I say, well, how many people are going to be there? And he says, oh, only hundreds. And I say, only hundreds. Okay, perfect. And so he says the final thing, which is, this is what's best for the company. It is. And I say, fine, I'll do it. So here I am, and here you are, and we're going to talk about satellites and Earth observation and all this stuff. And now many of you are probably wondering why, if I have such fun public speaking, did I wind up being a founder of a startup company? And I can answer that. I can tell you the exact day. I had not wanted to do this, also kind of in this semi-big accident. It was in Colorado. It was a couple years ago. I was in a small apartment. I was sitting at my computer again, middle of the night this time, middle of winter, and I was looking at my computer screen. Now, I had been working on something for the past few weeks, and there were some preliminary results that had sort of come through, and I saw these two curves that were on my computer screen. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about these here at Deep Tech Week. And I was looking at these curves that were kind of the results of this analysis, and I said, you know what? I'm going to have to start a company. This is what I knew. I said, I know that this idea is too good not to exist. I know this idea is too good to exist at any company that I've ever worked in. I know that I am now going to need to start a company from scratch to go do this thing. Now, what are these curves and how can they compel somebody to stand up here? Well, I'll tell you more. We'll start with the first one, the one on the left. I didn't invent this. This is the industry that's invented this. This is the great satellite scaling curve. Now, there are lots of satellites out there. They come in all shapes and sizes. But in general, as the satellites get bigger, something happens. The performance of the satellite improves. That's what it says on the bottom there for those who can't read. It's the performance on the bottom. Satellite gets bigger, performance goes up, right? Whatever it's doing, it gets a little bit better at. The other thing that happens, the other thing that increases as you make satellites larger, is the cost. And what the great satellite scaling curve tells us is that the cost goes up faster than the performance, right? This is true. And I can prove it to you. There's Earth observation industry, right? This is a type of satellite that we use very commonly, and I'm going to talk a bit about it. And there's a small satellite. It's about this big. It's about the size of a bread loaf, and it costs about $100,000, and it has 10-foot resolution, right? The camera that it has takes an image, the pixel in the image is about 10 feet by 10 feet, so about the size of a car. So a parking lot might be 5 feet, or 5 pixels by 10 pixels, something like that. And this is not very good resolution, right? We might want to identify if it is a car. We'll probably need more than 1 pixel to do that. And so we build larger satellites, which cost more and have higher resolution. Here's one now. So this has a resolution of 1 foot. It's 10 times the resolution, 10 times the performance. You'll note that it is 1,000 times more expensive to build this satellite, right? This is the great satellite scaling curve in action. In case 1 foot isn't enough for you, the government has classified programs that it builds that are less than 1 foot. We don't know exactly how much lower, but we do know that they cost roughly about as much as an aircraft carrier. So, it's a thing, right? Great satellite scaling curve. And this is kind of the great compromise that we see in this industry. We've always had to deal with this, right? You can have small satellites which collect frequent data. They have very wide coverage areas. They have very low resolution. Sometimes low enough resolution that you can't do anything useful with it. You can have a bigger satellite, and this may be helpful. You may have slightly better resolution, but you're losing out on the frequency, you're losing out on the coverage. In fact, the frequency and the coverage might be so low that you can't do whatever it is that you wanted to do frequently enough for it to be useful. Or you can go the ultimate in performance. You can fly a plane, or you can have a drone, or you can do the ultimate high-resolution imaging mode, which is to use your phone and take a picture from 5 feet away. All of these are very expensive, but they are very high quality. But again, the frequency and the coverage, right, they're tiny, right? Super, super tough to do this. And this is a big problem because there's all sorts of things that are going on in the world, all these sorts of changes that are being driven by, sometimes climate, sometimes the advance of technology, sometimes what's going on in different countries around the world. And we really would like to know what's going on in detail and comprehensively and frequently. I'll give you an example in the insurance industry, right? The United States has 150 million properties in either commercial or residential homes. We pay $700 billion every year to insure these homes. And if you think about the cost of natural disasters on these homes, it's something like $200 billion worth of damage worldwide by natural disasters on all of these different properties, right? This is a very large number. And if you understood what was going on in the world, and you understood what was happening with climate and change, that what was in the floodplain and what was not in the floodplain, or what was currently being affected by a natural disaster, this would be very helpful. Sometimes there's change driven by technology, right? So autonomy, there's road-going vehicles, self-driving cars. We very much want this. We have this here in San Francisco. But this is very expensive. And one of the big costs for this is the map that is used to have the road networks that are going on with a car. And this makes total sense because there's 50,000 miles of interstate and there's 160,000 miles of highway miles. And if you add all of the other tributaries and small roads all together, it's got like 4 million miles of roadway in the United States alone. And if you'd like to go map that at $10 per mile and you want to do that a couple times a month, this is going to be $1 billion in mapping costs. Which is why these companies have a hard time expanding and being profitable because they need to have this constant source of data that's up to date. As far as other industries, there's plenty more. There's AR and VR and XR. Imagine what Pokemon Go looks like in 5 years or even 10 years from now. There's heavy industry and ports and infrastructure and telecommunications and all of these things where we're either planning to build something, we're in the process of building something, or we have built something and we'd like to keep an eye on it. There's a need for accurate remote sense data. And then there's, of course, the military problems that are going on around the world. And generally, military problems get better when you know more about the situation at hand. And we've spent a lot of money collectively in the United States to figure out what's going on around the world. And we fly actually planes to do this job for us mainly. There's something called Intelligence, Surveillance, Reconnaissance, ISR aircraft. We have a huge number of them. And there's a number of problems with these aircraft, but they give us the best shot that we have of understanding what's going on overseas. One of the problems is these planes are very, very old. Many of them are older than Led Zeppelin. They're very, very expensive to own and maintain, therefore. We've spent something like $1 trillion so far in maintaining and developing and expanding this ISR fleet. And there's more problems, one of which being it's not enough, right? There are very large areas around the globe and they change very quickly and we need to know what's going on, so this is one problem. The second problem is, as you look around the world and you look around the countries that we'd like to keep an eye on or we'd like to know what's going on in, a lot of these countries have the ability to blow these planes up, right? It's very not obvious that if you send a plane out to a contested area that plane is going to come back to you. And so we have some problems with these aircraft, and now we're going to have another good idea. We're going to move to space, right? This is a whole huge thing, remote sense aircraft. This is the state of the industry. We're going to go, we're going to take the planes, we're going to remove the planes, we're going to put a satellite up instead. But remember our friend, the great satellite scaling cost curve, which tells us that if you try to make a satellite that can take as good of an image as an aircraft, that's going to be one very, very, very expensive satellite. And indeed, we have this problem where we build these battle-scarred Galactica satellites, and there's very few of them, and everybody knows where they are, and it turns out people can shoot those down too. So what do we do now? And this is kind of getting back to why we're here and why I was so excited back in Colorado and why I've been shanghaied into coming and standing on stage and talking to people about the technology that we're building. And it starts with this cost curve, right? We talked about the one on the left, let's talk about the one on the right, right? This cost curve on the left here, every increment in performance is harder and harder and harder. You start on flat ground, and before you know it, you're like scaling Mount Everest, right? It's very, very painful to try to build systems that get better and better and better. Is there some way that we could do the opposite? Is there some way that as performance improves, cost does not shoot off into the stratosphere? In fact, is there a way that as you incrementally increase the performance and capability of your system, that the cost actually improves and scales better? Turns out there is, and that's what we're building. So our company builds satellite swarms. These are small satellites, there's one here, that fly in formation. These are cheap and low cost and easy to manufacture, but unlike traditional satellites, they work together collaboratively to form a common picture of whatever it is they're looking at. So they transmit radar signals down to the ground, they transmit all of these satellites all at once, they image the same place at the same time from different angles, and this allows us to capture very high resolution imagery without having a gigantic satellite. We build kind of a pretend gigantic satellite. We stack a bunch of these satellites together on a big ring, we launch them into space, and maybe, if I'm lucky, this video will play. Okay, cool. Maybe if you're lucky, exceedingly lucky, you can actually see this, because I'm sorry, the model is not a lot of contrast here. But you can see that these satellites are flying. They fly in a great big ring. This ring is 30 miles in diameter. And this humongous, very, very large ring allows us to collect incredibly high resolution data, right? Instead of building a satellite that has a 30-mile diameter antenna, which is very hard to do, we simply fly satellites 30 miles apart from each other. And this is not impossible to do. So that's good. And we fly them across the world, and then they image different things. And they do it a whole lot better than traditional systems. Now, we'll talk a little bit about this curve in a little bit more detail, because this is Deep Tech Week, and so we're going to do a little bit more in Deep Tech. We're going to talk a little bit about how radar satellites work. There's 4 easy steps. The first step is you get energy from the sun with your solar panel. The second step is you send some of that energy down to the ground. The third step is it bounces off the ground, which you don't have much to do with. And then the last one is you capture some of that energy after it returns back to your satellite. More satellites, in our case. Now this is very power intensive. This is kind of a pain, right? You're doing flash photography from space, effectively. That's what this looks like. You know, you need a bright light, you can send all these photons down, or energy, electromagnetic energy down. And so it's very helpful if you have 2 things. One is big antenna and the other is a lot of solar panels. Big solar panel, big antenna, this is useful. The antenna helps you because it improves your efficiency. This is a one-to-one scaling. The more antenna you have, the less power you need to transmit down to the ground to be able to image whatever it was that you were looking at. The second one is the solar area, right? So the more solar area you have, the more power you have to work with. So if you double the antenna area, you need half as much power. If you double your solar area, you get double the power to use for whatever it is you're imaging. So that's in pictures, because pictures are easier. If you have one satellite, one solar panel, one antenna, you collect 1 times the amount of imagery. If you double the number of satellites, well, now you have 2 antennas. And you have twice as many solar panels, and so you get 4 times more imagery. And if you have 10 times the number of satellites, well, now you have 100 times more imagery, right? It's 10 times more efficient, you have 10 times as much power. This is a much better scaling curve than building a satellite larger and larger and larger and larger. Because, you know, when you build 20 satellites and you fly them together like this, the cost goes down because you're mass producing the satellites, right? And so you end up with this crazy curve that's completely different than anything else. This is what got me so excited in Colorado, is that as you increase the number of satellites, the performance gets better. If this curve seems somewhat familiar to you, this is network effects. This is the curve that built Facebook. This is the curve that built LinkedIn, right? It's this idea, Metcalfe's law, that if you, thank you, Alder. Metcalfe's law, as you increase the number of satellites or operators in a network, the network increases more efficiently, right? So this is really good. And this allows us to do something that no other satellite system has been able to do, which is to have your cake and eat it too. Have high resolution, aerial quality data frequently and over wide coverage areas. You don't have to choose between whether you'd like to see something clearly or whether you'd like to see it frequently. It also allows us to image in other interesting ways that other systems can't. We can image at nighttime, we can image in all weather conditions. It's particularly useful in natural disasters, like a flood, where you can actually image during the middle of a storm and see what's going on. You can image in all terrain environments. You can even form very precise 3D measurements in a single pass, which is super, super useful for all of the augmented reality and self-driving car use cases. Talking about military back again for a little bit, you can do a bunch of different missions with this same satellite system that can replace or augment the big, humongous, very, very expensive ISR fleet. One of those is you do the 3D imaging, just like for commercial applications, and you measure changes. This is super useful. Other things you can do, you can find out where all the boats are. You can find out where all the airplanes are, right? It's the same system. You're just pointing it at a slightly different angle, and you can collect data about different airspaces. You can even point them at different satellites, which is particularly useful for the military because they're worried about their Battlestar Galacticas getting blown up by, various bad actors. So this is a single system that can be used for all sorts of wonderful things to build a real-time 3D map of the world, which is our mission, right? Something that is comprehensive, reliable, and up-to-date, and allows us to understand what's going on for changing world. So thank you so much for your time and attention. Happy to go into more things later on, but for now, thank you so much.